We've had a lot of statements being made from the Energy Secretary Ed Miliband this week, the religious zealot par excellence in this government, saying that if you don't support net zero policies, if you don't believe in climate change, if you're a quote climate denier, you are unpatriotic, and that the issue of climate change is the biggest threat to the British way of life. I mean, you work in military intelligence over the years. Is it the biggest threat to British way of life?
Ed Miliband turning around and saying that the importation of Chinese technology is what we need to reduce the threat to British way of life. I think the biggest threat to British way of life is coming from a number of places. It's the uncontrolled immigration cross channel and other into this country that's destabilising our way of life as British people. It's the manipulation of the information sphere by hostile states who are behind sending a lot of these people into our country, and the way that that's going to affect those that can be manipulated when it comes to the voting population.
Oh! He's tied it all in. You've got to love that. Right, let's go to our next guest on this. Ross Clark, a friend of the show, of course, and author of the brilliant book, Not Zero, How an Irrational Target Will Impoverish You, Help China, and Won't Even Save the Planet. And I'm going to deduce from that title of that brilliant book, I know you've written many since then, but that's the relevant one to this topic. I'm going to deduce from that, Ross Clark, that Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary, probably thinks that you're unpatriotic.
He probably does. And if you remember a few years ago, the Daily Mail made the assertion that Ed Miliband's dad was hated Britain because of his communist views. And Ed Miliband was absolutely outraged by that. You know, yeah. How dare you accuse my father of being unpatriotic and so on. But now he's going around sort of throwing out these accusations that people who question anything about his energy policy are unpatriotic. Now, it's absolutely pathetic, isn't it?
What I find extraordinary is we call him a religious zealot here. I mean, it's a religious obsession because it's totally devoid of fact. But it's always very typical. The eco cult. Whenever there is criticism, throw out those insults rather than actually tackling the actual debate. Now, the debate has moved on. He was criticising Reform MPs and some Tory MPs questioning net zero policies as well. But Richard Tice, the Reform UK deputy leader, he's actually chosen to write to the biggest energy companies and basically he's told Britain's biggest wind and solar developers, they include SSE Renewables, Octopus Energy, Centrica, Equinor and others, to give them formal notice that a Reform government would tear up any deals that they strike with the Energy Secretary currently, and they would no longer get any subsidies for solar and wind power. Now, what impact would that actually have on the policy in the here and now?
Yeah, well, these are things called contracts for difference, which basically offer owners of operators of wind and solar farms a guaranteed price for their energy for 15, 20 years into the future.
That's a good deal.
It is a very good deal. There aren't
many companies who can get a guaranteed price. So no matter what happens to energy prices, up, down, whatever, they've got a guaranteed price.
It takes away all the risk, essentially. And they deny it's a subsidy. They say, oh, no, we don't receive any subsidies anymore. Well, yes, this is a
wait a second, so let's clarify. When that guaranteed price is happening, now the government effectively buys energy that they then... No, who buys the energy? Well, that's the thing I'm trying to work out, because we're paying for it.
There's a wholesale market. I mean, the electricity suppliers have to buy electricity on the market, and there's all kinds of arrangements for doing that. But basically what happens that if the wind farm and solar farm owners get lower market price than their guaranteed price, then the government makes up the difference. If, on the other hand, they get a higher price than the agreed price under the contracts for difference, well, the wind and solar farms then pay back the government the difference. But it is a form of subsidy.
Yes.
Now, it's one thing for Reform to say we're not going to issue any more of these contracts, but they're going rather further than that, and they're saying, well, we're not going to honour existing contracts. And I think that really wouldn't be a good idea, because they obviously end up in the courts, and a Reform-led government would very likely lose on that point.
But isn't the key thing there, that is going to, given where Reform are in the polls, and yes, look, we've got a long way to go to the next election, realistically. Mike Graham is unlikely, even he admits, to get his dream of getting an election tomorrow. tomorrow, in which case we're in a situation where this would actually possibly deter a lot of these companies from making a lot of the investments, spending the outlay on the basis that you think you're going to get 15, 20 years of guaranteed returns, and actually it's going to probably only be 5, and then you're going to be left with a whole heap of costs.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what I think Reform are up to. I mean, they're just trying
I think it's genius.
throw a spanner in
it.
the works of Ed Miliband's plan to expand wind and solar energy by sowing a bit of doubt in the minds of wind and solar farm owners that maybe this isn't such a good investment, and therefore we won't invest in.
I mean, we should all be investing in this, because this is where the big money is. I mean, this is the thing. You get the likes of, the Dale Vinces of the world, big Labour Party donor, big supporter of Ed Miliband, who says that people like you and me should probably be criminalised. Again, people use this phrase climate denial. I don't think you've ever denied there's a climate, neither have I. I find it quite bizarre. But anyone who questions anything of policy is somehow a bad person. It's like, lockdown, when people, any criticism or questioning of the science. Oh, you're a bad person. You should, be, taken out of polite society. It's a very, very strange thing to do. If you're very strong on your facts and you understand, your facts can clear the argument. I never understand why people want to shut down critics if they think that the critics don't have the facts on their side.
No, exactly. I mean, facts can stand up for themselves, can't they? And it's not just Dale Vince was a UN special rapporteur. These people who
usual suspects.
They use the UN to advance their own personal agendas. Who called for a sort of a ban on climate change denial, what she called climate change denial, the other day. There's only one reason why you would want to ban a point of view, is that because you don't have the confidence of arguing against it.
And this is the thing. The stories come in all the time, and I'm so glad there's now scrutiny of this. And you've been utterly brilliant at this, because you make it, a lot of it's very complicated, and you make it very, very easy for those of us who are not scientific brains to understand about what's really going on. But the stories we've seen this week about, £3,750 subsidies for people to buy electric vehicles, because people don't want to buy them. And even with the subsidies, the Tories had a subsidy of about £4,000. People still didn't want to buy the sodding things. And then to talk about, people can't charge them because they haven't got a driveway, which is something like 4 out of 10 people don't have a driveway. So we can give you a gully down the side of the street, so across the pavement, so we can have some wiring, so you can plug it in without causing a risk to pedestrians and getting sued by it. Forgetting the fact, when I live in a flat, if I were stupid enough to buy an electric vehicle, I'm lucky sometimes to park outside my own building, and I'm not at the front of the building, so I don't know where that wire is coming out anyway. I mean, it's almost like they don't know how most people live their lives. It is extraordinary. But they're also desperate for us to have heat pumps fitted. But now they're saying that households with heat pumps would get £200 a year off their energy bills. But why would you need to do that if we're told that the benefit of a heat pump is so obvious and brilliant, and that you can heat your home brilliantly and it will cost you less money? Why would you need to have an added discount paid for by the taxpayer?
Well, you wouldn't, because these heat pumps, they're absolutely expensive to start with. And then you know what happened when the previous government announced these £7,500 grants for heat pumps. The price just leapt. So all these companies thought, oh, that's very nice. We'll pocket all that grant as a profit. And but there's a more general point to be made here. Cheaper electricity for heat pump owners, grants for electric cars, and all these kind of subsidies, they go to relatively well-off people.
Exactly.
And you think the government bangs on and bangs on about how the people with the broadest shoulders must bear the greatest tax burden and so on. But when it comes to anything green, the whole thing reverses, and you get sort of, relatively poor taxpayers subsidising relatively well-off
every single person I know who drives an electric vehicle, it is their second car or even their third car. I know a couple, and I love them to death, but they go on about, like, we've got our green car, we've got our electric vehicle. I pointed out the other car parked in their driveway was an Aston Martin. We are subsidising people who can afford an Aston Martin. This is madness. Ross Clark, always fantastic to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. You're unpatriotic, so am I. We're both going to end up in jail. well. I've already bagged to the top bug. Whatever I'm going to go to jail for, climate denial, or knowing that a woman is a trans woman isn't a woman. I forget. I mean,
you're forgetting who's what.
Whatever it is, whatever I'm going to jail for, I want the top bug. That's my rule. Philip, I mean, this is the case. Everything they just deny it's a subsidy. They are literally throwing billions of pounds of our money at trying to push technology that people don't want, they can't afford, and they're basically subsidising the woke Guardian reading middle classes to try and make themselves feel good about things, because I'm saving the planet by buying a really expensive electric vehicle as my third car.
If everyone in the UK drove everything electric and had heat pumps and didn't rely on gas and all the rest of it, it would have zero effect on the global climate.
And I'll tell you what it would have an effect on. It would have an effect on the fact that no one could get anywhere or heat their homes. You know why? Exactly. Because a lot of it would be electric, and we don't have the electrical supply. Why don't we? Because we are relying too much on wind and solar.
Yeah. And we'd have bought it all from China. So it would have given the Chinese huge influence into the way our lives are.
And just to clarify, given that most of these things are made in China, how do they provide the energy for all those factories?
Oil, gas and coal.